Hello, and welcome to the Dissing My Ability podcast. I am your host, Ken Meeker, and my guest this episode is Julie Oliver. Julie is the Vice President of Programs at the Foundation for Blind Children, or also known as FBC for short. And I'll let her talk about FBC. In full disclosure, I've known Julie about 5 years, and I first came to know her when I was a student enrolled at the Foundation for Blind Children, and later she was a colleague and actually my boss. And today we continue to work together and collaborate on projects. Julie, welcome to the show.
Hi, Ken. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really honored to be part of your podcast.
Thank you. The pleasure is all mine. Just for the benefit of listeners, I want to make sure you don't personally identify as someone with a disability.
Correct.
Okay. But you work very closely with people who are blind or low vision, and even people that have multiple disabilities. That is also correct.
That is correct.
Okay, so would you like
Yes.
to share a little bit about the Foundation for Blind Children, what their mission is, when did they start, what are they all about, just for the benefit of our listeners?
Of course. I love to share all things FBC. Foundation for Blind Children is over 70 years old. We have really strong roots in the Phoenix community. We were actually started with a group of parents who had children with visual impairments. And at that time, the only way that their child could receive those specialized services to learn how to explore and access their world without sight was to go to the state school down in Tucson. So the Arizona State School for the Deaf and Blind was and is the state school. And at that time, the only way to get support was to either relocate your family or to send your child down to live in their residential program. And at that time, those particular parents said, that's great, but not for us. And so what they ended up doing is they recruited a TVI, a teacher of students with visual impairments, so a special educator who has specialized training in helping students access the world curriculum and learning all of those concepts such as assistive technology, independence, self-advocacy. They hired them, brought them here, and it started in their homes. And over the years, FBC has been in different physical places in Phoenix. Most recently, and for many years, we've been at 12th Street in Northern and Central Phoenix. We have programs for individuals of all ages. And we really like to say that we are here for any point in your journey of vision loss, whether that's from the point maybe a child is born and sent to Phoenix Children's Hospital, all the way to an older adult who might lose their vision later in life because of macular degeneration.
Obviously, they were great for me, and I went in as an adult. So, ironic little story or tidbit. The reason FBC could be partially, to blame for the podcast.
That is true.
Because a fellow student who I met at FBC, it was something that happened when she and I were together that led me to wanting to start the podcast in the first place. So I guess, FBC can claim a little bit of credit there.
We can get maybe like a little post credit.
Sure, I'm happy to. It goes without saying, I'm a big believer in the work that FBC does, and I am a strong supporter of the organization.
Well, and not to just shower on all of this amazing praise on you, Ken, but you brought great things to FBC when you were our career specialist and working with our adults, and some of the different things that you brought in for the curriculum and the connections with the community. We still have incorporated into our curriculum, and also then your lived experience, which is the best experience and the most important experience. And you brought that to students, and I love that.
Thank you. That means a great deal to me. It really, really, really does. But we're here to talk about your experience.
Ah.
Sorry, I had to. All right. So what is your history like in terms of, have you always worked in the nonprofit sector? What did you do if you did something else? And what kind of work was that if it was something else?
Yeah, I have a really interesting professional story. When I got done, while I was in graduate school, I grew up in the Midwest. I went to the University of Nebraska, and I was attending graduate school, and I was working at a organization called Boys Town. And Boys Town is a nonprofit that does a variety of things in both the educational space, research, and also they do a lot with behavior therapies, behavior interventions, in-home family counseling. And I was an in-home family counselor, and I worked with kids who had been removed from their homes, and I worked on the reunification process. And I worked with different state agencies, local county agencies, and I worked with the families to figure out strategies to have that student come back home and to help their family unit. And when I got done with graduate school, I decided that I didn't want to be a Midwestern girl anymore. And so I flipped a coin, and it was between Phoenix and Washington, D.C. And I ended up landing in Phoenix. And at that time, there were not a lot of jobs. It was early 2000s. There weren't a lot of jobs in the social services sector that were really something that I could see myself doing. And so I ended up getting into data analytics, and I did that for over 15 years. And I was a senior leader with a healthcare data analytics organization. And it was an amazing job. And I learned so much about processes and how to manage teams effectively and build relationships and amazing things that you can do with data, because I could have a whole podcast on this, Ken. Data can tell you so many things. I am so passionate about it. And I did that, and I did really well, and I really loved it, but I was getting burnt out at a few different levels, and my bucket wasn't full. And I wasn't happy. I wasn't a happy person anymore. And so I kept thinking about those times when I was happy, and it always went back to times I was volunteering to work with individuals who maybe were in a difficult place, or the work that I did at Boys Town or the YMCA, the time that I was able to work with kids. And so I made this decision to just really roll the dice, and I applied for a position at Foundation for Blind Children. And I thought, there is no way they are going to hire me. My resume doesn't even look like I work in the nonprofit sector anymore, right? We're, 15 years in. And I get a call, and then I meet with the then CEO, Mark Ashton, and we have this great conversation. And I said, "You're probably wondering what the heck I'm doing." And he's like, "I don't, because I did something similar. And you can bring a lot of different things to the nonprofit space." And so they took a chance on me, and I really, truly have found my forever space. I love this community. I love what I can bring to this community. I'm not an expert as a vision instructor or a vision therapist, but I can bring different aspects that help our organization, such as building a team that's high performing, coming up with processes and procedures to help us serve more people, build relationships with agencies like RSA or the Arizona State School for the Deaf and Blind, or other agencies across the country. So that's my kind of weird little journey, but I'm in the place that I'm supposed to be.
I think that there is and you and I have talked about this before. Oftentimes in the nonprofit space, it's kind of, well, we're going to do it the same way because that's the way
Yeah.
it's always been and that's the way it's always worked.
Yes.
And there is not the incentive, I'll say, as there is in the private sector for innovation and change, because in the private sector, if you just kind of stay with the status quo, you're going to be destroyed.
You
You
are.
know, you have to
Absolutely.
innovate, you have to come up with something new because you're fighting in the marketplace. And so you have to stay relevant. Um,
Yes.
and I think that it's really interesting that the value added to the nonprofit sector by individuals like yourself or when Mark joined is tremendous because you approach it from a different perspective that I think there's a ton of value in. And so I'm hoping you could talk a little about maybe like the balance that you found is like, I would call it kind of the secret sauce of
Hmm.
bringing in private sector experience, coupling that with, what's important within the nonprofit space and specifically with, providing services to individuals with disabilities and how, you're not the expert, you're not, you don't, you're not the provider, that the actual, instructor, you work at that operational level. So how do you see all of that intersecting in a good way where you see like positive changes and outcomes? I know what they are because I've
Hmm.
worked in it and
Yeah.
I've been there, but I'm hoping that for the benefit of listeners, you can kind of sort that out so that they understand where that value is and why it's so important to really provide really cutting edge
It's tricky.
services.
It's super tricky, Ken. And it was not an easy entry, but once I think there's the power of seeing results and the power of I'm going to be right along with you in this journey and we're going to figure it out together. There's this power in that um I'm along for the ride with you, right? I'm not just coming in and trying to introduce a new fancy concept or a new way to do something. I'm going to dig in for a minute and I'm going to be there with you and I'm going to appreciate that expertise that you bring in, right? As somebody who has specific training in working with individuals with vision loss, or somebody that is specifically trained in how to teach individuals how to use assistive technology. I'm going to be the first person to say, I don't know how to do that. But if you just give me a little bit of time and grace, I'm going to help you guys figure out how to do this a little bit more smoothly so that with that continuity, with that um, establishing of processes, with the accountability of reporting, it's going to make your job easier. And guess what? You get to serve more people.
Mhm.
And that mindset that you mentioned of, well, we've always done it this way. And so that's the way we have to do it. That's not something that's only in the nonprofit, it's in all sectors. I heard
Yeah.
it in analytics, right? I heard it from developers and I heard it from analysts. Well, this is how I've always done this process. And that's good. And what I need you to do is I need you to bring that knowledge and come with me on this journey to innovate and try to figure it out a little bit differently. And in the end, what I bet you're going to see is it's going to more positively impact our customer, our client, our student, whoever it is.
Yeah.
And if you can always take back and say, the reason we did this is for a better outcome for our student, whether it's an adult, a child, whoever, a teacher, we can go back and say it benefited them, it was for the benefit of them, then we're doing the right things.
Mhm.
And along the way, you can sneak in and say, oh, by the way, I want you to create a standard operating procedure so that it is a role specific function, not a Sally specific function,
Mhm.
right? Because that's where we get stuck. We get stuck because we say, well, I can't do that thing because Sally's not here to do it. And she's the only person with the knowledge. Well, you're always going to get stuck because what if Sally wins the lottery, right?
Hmm.
And so you have to be able to be comfortable in sharing your piece of the puzzle or your piece of the equation
Hmm.
and not be afraid to share that with your peers. And then, oh, by the way, you might learn something too. And maybe you'll get a chance to do something new, better, and different.
Yeah.
And so if you can break down the fear of, well, if you're going to ask me to document this thing or you're going to ask me to follow a very specific curriculum, I might, that's job security or whatever.
Hmm.
It's not. It's going to allow you to also grow as a professional. I also think that in in the disability space specifically, I believe that in general, we deserve better.
Hmm.
There is a betterment that needs to happen. And we can't settle. We have to continue to push for the best, the next best, and the next best. And if we're settling, we're doing a disservice. And so I love to challenge and I love to, hey, what's the harm in asking? And maybe they'll say no, but I bet they're going to say yes. And we're going to be able to move forward and we're going to be able to, do something new, something innovative and something that hasn't been done before.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times we get stuck because we've always done it that way, Ken.
Yeah. Yeah. I wholeheartedly agree. And I think that that is, unfortunately, it's not as common as both you and I would hope it would be. What do you think are some of the hurdles, or why do you think that innovation and, change is kind of slow within the space of like, providing, disability services? Because it can feel very archaic sometimes.
It can.
And why do you
It
think that
absolutely.
is?
I don't know. I have theories on it. I do think some of it comes from things like funding, right?
Hmm.
Um, I think sometimes things are just funded to the bare minimum, and that's the reality, right? And so you can't be super innovative if you don't have the money to be innovative, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, well, I think the mindset is the box was checked. So why go beyond? Well, there's a lot of reasons to go beyond.
Yeah.
Um, One of the things I think, Ken, I shared this with you when we were working together, is I went to a conference or two, and conferences in pharma are very different, right? They're big, they're
I'm pretty,
flashy.
yeah, they're probably a lot like
Yeah,
insurance
yeah. They're
conventions.
really they're energetic, they're exciting. There's lots of pomp and circumstance and just innovation galore,
Yeah.
right?
Uh-huh.
And walked into a conference or two, and I was like, whoa, whoa, like there's better that needs to happen. Better needs to happen here.
Yeah.
And so it has to start at the grassroots level with organizations like Foundation for Blind Children, right? Where we're going in and we're, figuring out a different way to facilitate something like a parent to parent peer support group, or we are changing up the way that a transition age summer program is delivered. We are looking at different ways to utilize our itinerant TVIs and O&Ms as consultants.
Hmm.
So you have to, kind of go in and be willing to take that risk. And because of things like funding and staffing resources, there's never going to be enough vision professionals to, serve all of the people that need to be served. People, I think, act more cautiously.
Yeah, because they're always, funding is limited and there's a limited number of resources available and funding sources.
Each state does things differently too. So
Hmm.
what happens in one state, that type of provider can deliver certain types of services. And then if for some reason you cross the state line, you're not qualified,
Hmm.
right? So there are also just peculiar things that happen that restrict people from going and extending themselves into another area because they're just going to get blocked.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. With regard to, so there's a couple things that I want to touch on that you mentioned. The first being services, providing them to more people. The foundation got its start because there was, families that didn't want to have to relocate so that their children could receive services, right? And so, with the advent of new technology and things being done virtual, have you seen that rolled out in a way where more people are able to receive services and get, the help and the assistance that they need in order to thrive because of technology? And how have you seen technology change the landscape of how services are provided and how they're kind of rolled out?
Absolutely. I've seen a change. I mean, the real catalyst for that was COVID, right?
Yeah.
Um, I remember when I first started, it was 100% without a doubt, you could never conduct a service with a student virtually. They had to be in the brick and mortar, in the building, physically here,
Hmm.
right? And overnight, March 13th, 2020, that changed.
Yeah.
And it was, again, sometimes it's those things that cause us to have to take the risk. So we all kind of walked off the cliff together and said, let's get everybody a computer.
Yeah, I
Let's
was
figure
there.
out, you were there, right? Let's get everybody a computer. Let's get, oh, this thing called Teams. What is this? This is crazy. I don't know what this is. But we figured it out, and it was energizing to figure it out because you had clients in Casa Grande and you had clients in Florence that were able to get services now, whereas before, they had to wait on a long list to get an itinerant provider to come out to see them. B, they had to be in the car for 2 hours one way to get here, and those
Mhm.
aren't great options.
Yeah.
And now I can, get on a meeting with you, and we can do some different things. Does it all work all the time? No. But are we learning different ways to do it? Yes. And I think with the advent of things like artificial intelligence and all of the new apps that are on the phones, seeing AI, things like Ira, all of those types of things are just enhancing the ways that we can deliver information. And I think that that's going to better all of Arizona. We just recently launched our 5-year plan, and our goal at Foundation for Blind Children is that in 5 years, every person with a visual impairment in Arizona has access to quality services and education. And that doesn't mean FBC has to be the people that do that, right? We just need to challenge everybody in our space to be there and to provide that quality of service and to raise the bar and the expectations and serve who we can serve across the state, Four Corners all the way down to Yuma.
Yeah.
And we're able to do that through technology and being creative in how we roll out instruction. Things like assistive technology, that's really not too difficult to teach via Zoom. Something like orientation and mobility, a little bit more
Yeah.
tricky, but with some creativity and maybe a family member who's by your side, and having the O&M observe, with a camera that's mounted on the student for a few concepts. I've shared with you before, your zip code should not dictate if you get quality services. And I truly believe that.
Yeah.
Whether it's education, whether it's mental health support, whatever it is, your zip code shouldn't dictate that you get good quality vision services.
Yeah, I agree. Accessibility is um the mechanism or the barrier for inclusion, right? When it comes to disability, it's if you don't have access, you're not going to get what you need. Um, and I remember that the transition because that's right when I was going to starting with FBC
Yeah.
was right in the middle of COVID, so
Yes.
that was a fun ride. Um, with all of that being said, and with the known barriers to like funding and whatnot, how can you maximize technology to provide to get us closer to that where it's available to the broadest swath of people that need it. How do you approach that challenge? Because, getting a computer to people that may not have one, there's always a cost associated with that.
Yeah.
So what are some of the challenges or the getting around those challenges as well so that you can really provide that access that you're seeking to?
Yeah, I think what some of it boils down to those agencies or those resources collaborating together,
Hmm.
right? So, one example that a lot of people may not know about is AZ-TAP, right? Which is the
Hmm.
Arizona Technical Access Program. And that's through Northern Arizona University up in Flagstaff. And
Yeah.
they have a program where they lease equipment and technology. But if you didn't know about it, how would work? Where are
Yeah.
you going to go to get it? And they can get that into your hands. They have contractors and providers all over the state.
Yeah.
And I think so much of the challenges, whether it's in Arizona or New Mexico or California, is there's not this consolidated place for information that somebody can go
Yeah.
and say, hey, I'm a older adult and I live in Kingman and I don't know what to do. What's out
Yeah.
there for me? And
Yeah.
if I'm not versed in accessing the internet or doing those things, I'm not going to know what to do. And maybe I'm going to have to rely on a friend or somebody. And so I think it's incumbent upon those of us in the space that are offering services to share that information more, to get in front of the ophthalmologists or the low vision specialists and saying, hey, we have these services. We're
Hmm.
not just the Foundation for Blind Children who serves children based on our name. We serve individuals of all ages. We're not just Arizona Center for the Blind and Visually Impaired. We're also serving individuals who are deaf, combined vision, and hearing loss.
Hmm.
So much of it, I think, is our information is fragmented and separate. And if there's some way that we can bring that all together, I think it's going to be for the betterment, in this case, of Arizona.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Creating awareness, right?
Yeah.
That's the biggest challenge. That's something when I'm doing talking to groups or doing advocacy when I was, speaking in San Diego at NCDA, the biggest question I get from people is where do I find, resources? Where do I find the resources? And something I'm personally working on and spending a fair amount of time on is trying to build as comprehensive of a database as I can of what's out there, what's available, because one doesn't exist. Like even
No, it
some of the
doesn't.
better ones are still extremely limited. And it just kind of boggles my mind that there isn't a place that's known to people where they can easily access information and resources. And because there's so much out there, there's just not an awareness of it, right? Um,
Yeah. And I think, I think about our New Horizons programs. So that program is specifically targeting the retiree population.
mhm.
So your older adults who have lost vision, maybe later in life. And it really started as a small community. We got funded through a grant and we were able to bring on a individual and she started building up these relationships with retirement communities and assisted living facilities. And then the next thing you know, that assisted living facility had a aide that transferred to another assisted living facility. And the next thing you know, we're serving a few hundred people.
Mhm.
And we have our first older adult walking group, kind of like a senior fitness thing. And it's
Oh,
these little kind of things just evolve from word of mouth, but there's got to be a better way to do it, right?
yeah,
Um, but one of the things that I think backing up that we need to figure out is who are all of our people that we're trying to find, right?
yeah,
There isn't a great comprehensive data set that says, here's all the people who have a visual impairment, right? I wish,
Yes.
but we don't. And so, we can't, I probably said this to you once, we can't boil the ocean, right? We
Yeah.
need to start looking a little bit more strategically at where people are. And
Yeah.
so one of the things that I am working on this year is a big data project to figure out where people are in Arizona, because it doesn't make any sense for me, overseeing our itinerant team, to send a provider out to Holbrook when there's the population's not there.
Yeah.
And so this data study that I'm doing, my hope is that I'm able to see by age segments, by geographies, not zip code level, but a little bit rolled up. Where are people? And that will help us figure out where do we need to be communicating and who to, right? So, okay, if the data is telling us we've got to get somebody down in Yuma, then we need to go start having conversations with hospital systems, providers, schools, all of that.
Yeah.
And I think the data will start to be the key to that.
Yeah. Yeah. It'll certainly share some insight.
Yeah.
I'm going to switch gears here just a little bit because I wanted to talk about something that I think the foundation is just blows people's minds, and I want to be able to spotlight it a little bit to the Trailblazers, which
Oh,
is
yeah.
just incredible.
Yeah.
And when I talk about it to to pretty much anybody, their mind is just blown by what that program does and what it gives to people.
Yeah.
So can you share what is the Trailblazers and what's it all about?
Well, so there's a few different flavors. And originally we had what were called challenge events. And what the challenge events were meant to do were to say, here's a thing that's really hard to do, right? So climbing Mount Kilimanjaro,
Yes.
that's hard to
Hard for
do.
anybody. Hard for
Hard for
anybody.
anybody. That's just hard. It's plain hard. And so, what's a thing that we've identified, irrespective of a disability or irrespective of your vision, that's hard to do? Okay, we've identified it, Mount Kilimanjaro. So, now what we want to do is we want to have students who have visual impairments do that thing, which requires a ton of training,
Yeah.
right? A ton of upfront work. And they can then go do the thing, which is amazing, but it's the after
Hmm.
that's the most amazing thing. And so we've done a few different challenges. So we've done the Mount Kilimanjaro. We had some students swim Alcatraz. We've done and hiked the Grand Canyon and Bright Angel and spent 10 days on the floor of the canyon rafting the Colorado twice. We've done something called Blind Buccaneers, where students learn how to sail boats around the Spanish Virgin Islands and live on the boats and do all of the things to maintain the boat. And then we've done things that are a little bit more leadership and academic, maybe by nature. We did something called Trailblazers DC, and that was really about students having that opportunity to see the inner workings of what's happening in DC, but also to meet with people who are influential, who are policymakers, to understand government, to go visit places like the Library of Congress and see possibilities. And in the end, what we find is the students who go on those experiences are the students who end up graduating college and getting a job. And I fully believe that the reason that that happens is because a spark's been ignited in them where they believe in themselves.
Yeah.
They know they can do
They can.
anything.
Yeah.
They can. for so often they've been told, oh my gosh, I need to wrap you in bubble wrap and you can't do that thing. And, all of the things, all of
Hmm.
the reasons why you can't. And they go and they do it. And what a better story than going into a job interview and somebody asks you, well, tell me about a difficult time or a time where you had to push through adversity.
Yeah.
Well, let me tell you about a time that I was, on the floor of the Grand Canyon. I hiked down there with limited sight. What a great story. And I
Yeah.
came out on the other end.
Yeah.
And, Kaiya Armstrong, she did one of our most
Yeah.
recent challenges. Yeah, it was called Flight for
Yep.
Sight.
She did. Yeah. When I tell people about that,
Yeah.
they really are floored.
Yeah. And so what's the thing that we think people who have a visual impairment can't do? They can't what? Drive and fly. And so we were like, well,
I'm still with the driving part, but
you know. So we figured out a way.
Yeah.
And Kaya learned all of the inner workings of a plane. She was the pilot and had a sighted co-pilot. And she left Mesa, Arizona, and hopped through, I think, New
Yep.
Mexico, Kansas City, Louisville, Kentucky, and
Yep.
ended up in College Park, Maryland.
Yeah.
What a story.
Yeah. It's
And now,
amazing. Yeah.
yeah,
It's,
what a
I mean,
great
yeah.
story.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
And
she called me from New Mexico on the first day after. She's like, "Oh my God, you're not gonna." It's just amazing to see that transformation in somebody
yes,
where they don't put there's those limits are gone because I tell people all the time, we all have limits, no matter whether
sure.
you are able-bodied or not. I'm never going to be a basketball star because I'm just not, because I don't have those aren't my faculties, right? We all have limits. Nobody can do everything, all the best, everything. It's just the truth. So, but there's a lot we can do. So focus on that, right?
Yeah. And then showcase to the world all of those things that you can
Yes,
do that people said you
absolutely.
couldn't do, right?
Absolutely.
And and they're exceptional events, but again, I go back, I wanted to light the spark for
Yeah.
that student, for them to believe in themselves, that they can do anything with hard work
Yeah.
and with belief in themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
And
the
yeah,
magic point. Like that's why we do what we do, right? Is
yeah.
that point where that transformation where because you can see it happen almost. It's like
Mhm.
there's this moment where they just believe in themselves.
Well, and this summer, Ken, you were so gracious with your time and you spent time with our summer teen programs, our teen to work and our college prep program. And, they're 5-week programs, but from the point that those kids walk on Arizona State University West Campus and check in to the day that they leave, I see growth in 5 weeks.
Yeah.
I see kids who couldn't hold their head up and have a conversation with confidence on, day one of boot camp. And then their day before they graduate, they're coming and giving a speech on a very powerful topic in front of a large audience and a panelist,
Yeah.
right? And to see those transformations is so important. And it's, I think, gives that safe space for the student, right, to
Hmm.
feel accepted and to feel empowered. And once they do it in that space, then they're like, I can do this beyond. I can do this in my
Yeah.
school, right?
Yeah.
I can do this in my community. I can do this in college. And they just need that one win.
Yeah.
That's what I think. It's a one win.
Yeah. Absolutely. And then that just leads on to more and more and more. And sometimes
Yeah.
that one win can, it truly can be transformative when you have somebody that says, I believe in you.
Yep.
And backs it up with action. Just not just lip service.
Yeah.
It's like I believe in you, and I know you. I'm gonna, like you said earlier, I'm gonna walk with you. I'm gonna be right there with you for this journey. I'm not gonna do it for you,
Yes.
but I'm gonna be with you.
Well, and having the hard conversation too, right? To be okay. And I think sometimes people walk around with eggshells and think, oh gosh, I can't say anything, because this person has a visual impairment
Hmm.
or whatever. No, how are they going to improve? How are they going to grow if you don't have a honest, crucial conversation with them.
Yeah.
We have to. And you have to be able to call somebody out and say, hey, you're not being accountable. You didn't show up. I
Yeah.
need you to show up. And then
Yeah.
I'll be here with you the whole time, but you also have to show up. I'm
Yeah,
not gonna,
exactly.
yeah. I'm not gonna, enable you or do the thing for you. You need to show up. And that's the fine balance, right? Because we all want to be supportive, but you have to be able to also do it with a realistic push.
Yeah, there's a great reward at the end of being accountable, I think, and
Yeah.
being responsible ultimately for your own success and your own, having that independence and that
Hmm.
sort of self-determination is something that is so, unfortunately, is still so often not accessible to so many people with disabilities. And that's why I'm such a big believer in what the foundation does, is because it's really trying to say, all right, we are here. If you want that self-determined, if you want to determine your future, if you want to succeed in life at whatever it is, here we are as a resource for you, but you have to do the work too.
Yeah.
We're not going to do it for you. We will be with you. We will support you. We will give you all the things to help
Yeah.
you be successful, but you got to do the work.
Well, and I mean, we had this conversation, I know, when you were working as the employment specialist, and, you can work all day long and, work on the mock interviews
Hmm.
and polishing the resume
Yeah.
and getting your online presence. But unless that client shows up,
Yeah,
Julie, can't get you that job. That's yours to get.
exactly.
But
It's on their shoulders.
I'm gonna be there to help you build that toolkit.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You will equip them with what they need, but like you said, they got to show up.
You got to show
Um,
up. Yeah.
and just in life, you got to show up.
Yeah. I mean, I have this conversation with my daughter like on a twice a day basis.
Got to show up.
If you want to change, you got to show up, right? You
Yeah.
have that change in you, so ignite it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just wonderful to see it in so many young people and, all different types of people. Thank you for bringing that in a space that really desperately needs it, because it's not as common as it should be, unfortunately. I really see the foundation as a place that does true innovation in terms of the
Yeah.
services it provides. So I really appreciate you coming on and talking about what they do, what you do, what brought you to it. So if people want to learn more about the Foundation for Blind Children and their services, where can they find you? Where can they reach out? Where can they get that information?
That is a great question, Ken. Well, we can be found at seeitourway.org, and it's seitourway.org. We are located at 12th Street and Northern in Phoenix. We are on all the social medias: Facebook, Instagram, likely TikTok, YouTube. We've got it all.
Yeah, I'll put all the links down
And
in the description as well.
yeah, that would be fantastic. And if anyone has a question, you can reach out to me directly at any time. You can email me. My email is joliver@seeitourway.org. I love to give tours of FBC. I love to show people what we're doing, because unless you are here, you can't even imagine
Mhm.
all of the amazing things that are
So true.
happening on this
So true.
campus.
It's so
Um,
true.
it's so true. I mean, and very different things.
Yeah.
I mean, I could talk all day about what we do here because I am so proud of it. And we can't do that without such amazing teachers and paraeducators and professionals and braillists and technicians and assistive technology teachers. I mean, we are just so very lucky to have the support of Phoenix and Arizona, and it's just really an amazing place. And I'd love to have people come on over and tour and check us out.
Yeah, my brother was completely floored when I took him over there. So he was like, "Wow, this place is so cool." Because it is, it really is. It's an amazing place to be. So Thank you so much for joining me on the show today, Julie. I really, really appreciate you, all the work you do. This has been the Dissing My Ability podcast. I am your host, Ken Meeker. And as always, please remember to be kind to others and yourself.